This is the brand new OBSBOT Tail 2 AI-powered live production camera, and it's got some really cool features that makes this camera really versatile and also just really great for solo creators due to its amazing AI tracking and 12 optical lenses, which is what made me super intrigued about this camera. This video is sponsored by OBSBOT, and they did send me this camera to review, but I'm being 100% honest in this video. The OBSBOT Tail 2's AI tracking is really good. It can track people, over 30 different types of animals, and also over 200 objects like planes, cars, and bikes. It's super easy to use, and the tracking locks on and it stays on. Even if you do move behind an object, it will lock straight back onto you as soon as you come back into the frame. And because it's on a gimbal, it can track you really smoothly as well, which is why it's just so great for solo creators and videographers who want to record themselves, or even if you need a B or C camera on your video productions. I've tested the tracking on myself in a few different scenarios, and it's been amazing. And also with my mate playing football at the park the other week, all you have to do is double tap on the subject that you want to track, and the camera takes it from there. And you do all of this by connecting the camera to the OBSBOT app on your phone, and this is how you can control the camera's settings and also how you can see the frame, so you will spend a lot of time in this app. There are so many settings to change in the app, and one of them is the zoom, like I mentioned earlier, and this is what makes the OBSBOT Tail 2 so good, because you can optically zoom in 5 times without losing any quality, and also up to 12 times digitally, which does lose quality a little bit, but it can zoom in so far, which really came in handy when we did play football, because the camera zoomed in all the way and kept me perfect in frame when I was playing football, and it still tracked me wherever I went. And this is why it's just so good for solo creators, because you can record by yourself and you don't have to worry about the frame at all when the camera is tracking you, because it is just so good. And this is why I think it's so great for solo creators, because I can really see this camera being great at behind the scenes content. I really did want to use it at a recent wedding that I did shot a few weeks ago, but just due to how manic it was, I just didn't have time to set it up. But I can definitely see myself putting this on a tripod at a wedding as a C camera for the ceremony, and also recording behind the scenes content of myself filming, which is just great for posting on social media, especially because the camera can actually rotate 90 degrees, so it can shoot vertical content perfectly without compromising on any quality. With the camera being able to rotate 90 degrees, it also has an awesome auto leveling system to make sure the frame is always perfectly level at all times. This is great for long takes when you are moving around, and it also pairs great with the Tail 2's AI auto framing feature, which utilizes the 12 optical lenses to ensure that the subject is perfectly framed at all times. So if you do come close to the camera, the camera will zoom out to one of the wide lenses, and then when you move further away from the camera, it will actually zoom up to its 12 times zoom to keep you perfectly in frame, all while tracking you super smoothly, which is why it was great for me when, like I mentioned earlier, when I did play football, because no matter how close I came to the camera or far away, the camera tracked me and zoomed in to make sure I was always in frame at all times. It's pretty much like having your own cam op filming you on a fluid head tripod, because it can track you so smoothly, getting wide and tight shots wherever you go. It really is pretty cool. And if you don't like the auto framing the camera chooses, you can actually set your own frame using the composition lines in the settings to actually tell the camera where in the frame you want the subject to sit. So for example, on the left rule of thirds line, now the camera will actually still track and zoom in, but at this time it will be at the frame where you want the subject to be, rather than let the camera pick the frame for you. We did actually try and track the ball as well, which actually did lock onto it, but as soon as we took a shot, it was just way too fast for it, even on the fastest tracking mode. But if I'm being honest, I don't blame it, because that was just super quick. Also, if you don't have access to your phone, like if, for example, if it's in the changing rooms, you don't have to worry about not seeing the frame because of the AI auto framing feature, like I mentioned earlier. You know you're going to be in frame no matter where you go because of how good the AI tracking is, but how do you record or activate the tracking without the app? Well, the Tail 2 actually supports gesture controls to be able to do all of those things. If you put your hand like this, this activates the AI tracking on the person who made the gesture. And then if you do this gesture, this starts the recording. And then if you do this gesture, this enables the auto zoom in. So you can operate this camera without any monitor or buttons, and you know if the camera followed your instructions because it will make a noise, and it also has a tally light to show you if it's recording or not. This is why I think this camera is so good for not only live productions like this camera is advertised for, but also, like I said earlier, for solo creators like myself. Now let's get into another important aspect, and that is the specs and image quality of this camera. The Tail 2 has a over 1.5 inch CMOS sensor that can record up to 4K 60 frames per second and also 1080p up to 120 frames per second for super slow motion. And it has a variable aperture of f1.8 to f3. And for your reference, I've been filming on this camera for this entire video. So what do you think of the image quality? This isn't the biggest sensor in the world. For example, the DJI Pocket 3 has a 1-inch sensor, which is about 68% larger than the OBSBOT Tail 2, but it's just for reference on the size of the sensor. Even though a bigger sensor's been better in low light, the Tail 2 has pretty good low light performance still because of its AI noise reduction algorithm and AI-powered image signal processor technology, which makes the image just look cleaner and less noisy and muddy, so it can be pretty usable in low light scenarios. It also has a HDR mode, which significantly improves the dynamic range of the camera, and I really do recommend that you use this in most scenarios if you want as much detail in the highlights and the shadows as possible. It just requires a little bit more editing in post to bring back the colors and contrast, but when I did change to HDR mode compared to the standard mode, I was shocked because there was so much more dynamic range in the HDR mode compared to just a normal standard profile. The Tail 2 has some amazing connection ports on the body, which is what makes this camera so good for live productions. It has a 3G SDI port, a HDMI port to connect to an external monitor, so you don't actually need to use your phone all the time to connect to the app. It has an Ethernet port, a USB 3.0 port for fast data transfer, an RS-232 port, a mic jack to connect to an external mic, which is what I'm doing now because there's no internal mic on the Tail 2, a line-in port, a micro SD card port to record all of your data to, and also a USB-C charging port to charge the internal battery, which can last up to 5 hours. This camera is a really cool piece of kit, and I can definitely see myself using it on productions as a C camera if I want to track summit, zoom in really far, and definitely as a behind the scenes camera. I really do think it will be amazing at that, but it is quite expensive at £999, but it is a pretty impressive piece of kit that is super versatile for so many productions and so many different types of shooting, and that AI tracking is just so good. There are things that do annoy me on this camera, like the fact that there is no lock on the gimbal, so when you are traveling with it, the gimbal is loose because it doesn't lock together, so it does move around all the time, which does make me a little bit nervous because of how expensive this camera is. Another thing that annoys me is that you have to connect a monitor or use your phone to view the frame, and I know it's not designed to have its own monitor, but the fact that it is so versatile and it can be used for so many different things, it would have been nice just to have a little one or have an easy mounting point to mount a monitor to the camera when it is on a tripod, because there's only one screw at the bottom of the camera, so mounting a monitor to this camera is a little bit awkward, especially if you are using a tripod, which in most scenarios this camera is pretty much going to be on all the time. It also takes a while to turn on and connect to your phone. The camera has to boot up, then you need to click on either pair with Wi-Fi or cellular data, and then you need to select the Wi-Fi that you want, and then it connects. And it just takes a really long time when you're just used to a mirrorless camera or something like a DJI Pocket 3. Also, in my experience, when connecting to Wi-Fi, the app is pretty laggy and not responsive when a subject moves, but that could be because I'm currently testing it at the moment in my office, which is quite far away from my Wi-Fi, and it is a lot slower in this room. But when I did change over to cellular data, it was considerably quicker as well, so it all depends on how good your signal and connection actually is. You can also use manual mode to change your ISO, shutter speed, white balance, picture style, and EV compensation mode, and you also get an option to use ND filters for this camera to keep the shutter angle rule if you do want to use manual settings. But apart from in this scenario now, I'm just going to use it in auto to make my life way easier, unless I am using it on a professional production like a wedding, because I don't want my exposure changing mid-shot. But for BTS, auto is the way for me. Overall, I've had a pretty good time with this camera, and obviously, like I said earlier, the standout performance of this camera for me is the tracking and the zoom, but mainly the zoom, because the tracking pretty much works similar to my DJI RS4 Mini when the tracking module is on that. You give it a gesture and it starts tracking you left to right. But the one special thing about the OBSBOT Tail 2 is that amazing 5 and 12 times zoom. On the DJI RS4 Mini, whatever you set it to, that is it. If you want a 35mm lens, if you want a 50mm, a 24mm, that is all it's going to get, and it's going to track you like that. The framing won't be the best. And yes, it does the job, but the OBSBOT Tail 2, especially using the AI auto framing feature, it is just going to be so much better than the tracking on the DJI RS4 Mini, because it can zoom in and keep a really nice frame. Like I said, if I'm out here shooting a wedding and I'm getting this shot over here and then I move over like quite far away, like I said, because it can still track you when you do move in front of an object, it can pick you back up, zoom into you, and you're still pretty nicely framed up in the image, especially if you, like I said, use the composition lines to make the frame yourself. If I want to be on the right side of the frame, for example, I can tell the camera to do that, and it's always going to keep me on that side. No matter how far away, it's going to zoom in. When I get close to the camera, it's going to zoom out. Like I said, it's like having someone operating a camera filming you behind the scenes. So that's probably the main thing I am going to use this camera for. And if I'm being honest, like even in just stuff like this actually looks pretty nice. Like the dynamic range obviously isn't as good as my Canon R6 Mark II in C-Log3, but in a controlled environment like this, I'm pretty sure it's going to look good. And in my opinion, I think it looks pretty good straight out of camera like this. So like I said, let me know what you guys think. Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Are you going to be picking one of these cameras up? I think they're pretty cool. It is expensive, but you're getting a lot for your money here, and it is so versatile. So thank you very much for watching, and I guess I'll see you guys on the next one. See you later.